One of the games you found to be pretty cool is the Hikaru and Nakamura versus Gelfand in 2009, and that one I think includes the King's Indian defense.
Yes.
Why is that an interesting one to you?
I also play the King's Indian as black, and I loved this model game, and as Alex was saying, like all these advantages for the King's Indian, but now there's this one line that like every higher rated player just destroys my King's Indian, and you see these beautiful games and you're like, yes, I want to play for these ideas, but now no one plays into it anymore and you just get demolished. So this is why I don't play the King's Indian anymore, but not to ruin the fun or
It's a love-hate relationship,
just the truth,
truly.
the reality.
But that's like the higher level players do, or does everybody?
Yeah, if you're studying openings and you know this line as white, you automatically get the upper edge.
And that's kind of how openings develop. You start having players trying new lines, and then you see ones, and then everybody adopts it if they think it's the best one. But yeah, so Hikaru is really known for his aggressive style of play.
Is Hikaru black here or what?
Yeah, Hikaru is black here. So he's playing the King's Indian. And as you can see in this position, white already has a huge center advantage. But what Hikaru is going to start doing, even with the next move, is bringing all of his pieces towards the white king side, because his plan is to start pushing his pawns towards the white king and ignore the attack that goes on in the queen side. This is a great example of the
dream attack with the King's Indian.
So there's a complete asymmetry towards the king side. On the left side of the board, there's a ton of pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, he moved the knight like 3 times in a row.
Yep, and that's what you need to do, because you have to move the knight in order to make space for your pawn. So again, this is why it's so counterintuitive and Stockfish doesn't like it. You're putting almost most of your pieces on the back rank, and you're pushing your kingside pawns, and you're blocking your own dark squared bishop. So none of it makes sense.
You're mimicking it. That's awesome.
Okay, so yeah, here you see white going for a queenside attack, black going for the kingside attack, and you can keep going a little bit, and I'll wait to where he starts with the pretty sacrifices.
It's more fun to analyze games in person than on the computer, I think.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so here Hikaru is preparing the attack, and what I really like about this game is that he finds these tactics that are not necessarily what a computer would go for, but it's very hard to face as a human, and that's why a lot of people play the King's Indian, because in practice, it's hard to defend against. So we can keep moving a little bit forward. Okay. Yep, so white is just continuing the kingside plan.
No, it's the first. Is that like the first piece I think that's taken in the game?
Yep, that's the first trade. So
he begins.
Exactly. Hikaru had to pause his attack for a little bit to just make sure that white didn't have too dire threats on the queen side.
So cool to see the asymmetry of this thing.
Exactly. That's what's beautiful about the King's Indian.
And just one thing to highlight, because his rook move here is very bizarre, and typically, like, a computer probably didn't like this, but the ideas are very interesting, because this is a major weakness for black that they're coming to attack, and he's also making room for his bishop to come backwards and challenge. So this is like a human-like maneuver that computers
I think computers would like this, though, because you'd have to move it regardless, because he takes the pawn here and his rook would be under attack.
Yeah, well, have you looked at it? When I actually studied this as a line, and this right away isn't the best move current computer.
So actually, that's a good question. So do you guys, when you study games, use your own mind, but do you also use computers to build up your intuition? Of like looking at a position like this and what would a computer do, and then try to understand why it wants to do that?
When I was studying seriously, I would try to use my own mind, because you're never going to get the exact same position. So you really need to notice trends. And often computers will give you moves that are only specific to that position because of a certain tactic. But I do use computers to check what I did and make sure I didn't make any obvious blunder that I might have missed.
What does a computer tell you? Just like what is the best move? Or does it give you any kind of explanation of why?
It doesn't tell you why, but it gives you the different valuations of the position. Like black is down a half pawn here or something like that. But it hints you towards what the right move is, and then it's on you to figure out why. And you could usually figure out why, if not right away, then just by going through a few moves and being like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
I feel like a computer will take you down with some weird lines, potentially. Like sacrifice, like, why the hell am I sacrificing this?
Well, we'll get to the pretty sacrifice soon. So we could just keep playing.
The pawns are being pushed forward?
Yeah. And Hikaru is kind of ignoring the queenside attack here. They basically both only reply to each other's plan when they have to.
This is where you convert all the podcast viewers to YouTube.
Yeah.
They have no idea what we're talking about
No,
right now.
there is a Zen like experience of just like listening and imagining.
The
Just-
board.
Just
Imagine the
that
pieces on the ceiling.
Yeah, we should be calling them out, and then people will be freaking out even more. Am I supposed to keep track of like, what the
We
position
could.
is?
It's too late now. It's too many.
How hard is blindfold chess? Have you tried? Like, are you able to keep the
I've
board?
played blindfold chess before. For me, it's pretty hard. It's not a muscle that I've trained as much, and I'm very visual when it comes to chess. But it is one as a top player that starts becoming very second nature for you.
Actually, this is what I talked to Magnus about this. Maybe I was again influenced by Queen's Gambit. What do you actually visualize when it's in your head? So for Magnus, it was a boring 2D board.
Right.
Do you have some kind of?
That's every chess player, no.
You don't have like, because you know some chess like computer games, you can do all kinds of skins and like fancy stuff. You don't have anything
Sadly,
fancy.
I don't have like a cool 3D warrior mode on. It's just the
chess
basic
base board in my head. Because you can't use your brain power for adding colors to it because you already have to keep track of the pieces.
And it's one board at a time?
Yes.
Okay.
The current position.
I bet every chess. I wonder if there's any who.
There's
look at it
certain
differently, but I feel like
players
it'd be very
who are really
universal.
good and they can even play blindfold chess and play multiple games at the same time. So I would be curious how they do it. But usually when you're thinking of one game, that's the only one in your mind.
Yeah, but you have to do this operation where you move one piece.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing like the branch analysis, like
Yeah.
and so you still have to somehow visualize the branching process and not forget stuff. Maybe that's like constant memory recall or something.
Right.
You're always looking at one board at a time, but
And you're also because you're also looking in the future.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you have to backtrack.
Calculating
I guess
variations and
you're
coming
keeping the
back.
position in your memory, so you're remembering where all the pieces are, and then you're playing it out on one board, and then you can come back to the initial one that you started with that you kind of just keep in your brain, and it's also easier to come back to it once you've played a position from it.
I feel like it's that memory recall that gets you to blunder. So I'll like see that I'm being attacked by certain things. But then because I get so exhausted thinking about a different thing, I actually forget about an entire branch of things that I was supposed to be worried about.
That happens very often. Yeah, if you spend a bunch of time calculating in a position, let's say, like when you're really in trouble and you're spending 15, 20 minutes calculating, you'll forget about something that you spotted, like, oh, if I do these 2-3 moves, I'll walk into a trap because you've looked at so many lines, and then you play it and then you see it and you're like, oh, I looked at it and I saw it, but I forgot about it.
Yeah.
So
it's often called tunneling, where you're just looking so deeply on one thing, you forget about the rest of the board.
And it's the worst when, at least in a beginner level, there's like a bishop just sitting there, obviously attacking your like queen or something. And then you just forget that bishop exists.
Yep.
Because if they just sit there for a few moves and don't move, you just forget their existence. And then it's just, that's definitely very embarrassing.
Well, it happens to everyone, so.
Yes. Okay, cool.
Okay, so we see a few trades happening on the queen side where he had to go for those, otherwise he's in trouble. And this is where the game. Oh, sorry.
This is where it gets exciting.
Yeah. So knight h4 is really when the sacrifice starts, and here the two important pawns are the ones in front of the king because they're helping with the entire defense. And Hikaru is actually preparing to sacrifice his knight for a pawn, just so that he can continue his attack and open up the position. Because if you don't do that here as black and don't get some kind of attack, you are completely lost on the queen side. And also, you've pushed all of your own king side pawns, so you're going to be in danger. So it's one of those do or die moments.
Oh, okay. So that's what makes it all in, because the king is wide open.
Yeah. The king is wide open, and you all of white's pieces are pointed towards the queen side too, where you're also cramped.
So is the attack primarily by black done by the two pawns and the knight?
And the light squared bishop is always
there it is.
extremely important. So you don't want to trade this in the King's Indian because it's very helpful for a lot of attacks.
Even though it's on the other side of the board, I guess it can go all the way across. I'm not sure what it's doing here, but probably threatening.
Like for example, if it was another move black could have played, would be something like bishop h3, where if you take the bishop, you actually get mated on g2.
With what?
So let's say you take here, and then you could push the pawn, and then it would be checkmate.
Oh,
So
wow.
you're kind of using
Cool.
your bishop to sacrifice against white's kingside pawns.
Yeah. I'll be freaking out if their bishop did that.
Exactly.
What are they up to?
Right. And that's the thing. This position looks very scary as white because
Mhm.
all of black's pawns are starting to come towards you. And it's one of those things where humans do start to worry in these positions, whereas computers obviously can just calculate the best line and maybe the attack doesn't go through.
So you're saying a computer might say that the white is actually a slight favorite here.
Yeah,
It's possible.
potentially.
Exactly.
Okay. So then white makes a little bit of room by moving the rook,
Right.
and the attack begins.
I like the commentary here.
Wearing out the king.
the knight is hugging the king.
And actually white can't even take the king here because then h4 and h3 is coming in.
We can't
and-
take the knight.
Yeah. Oh, did I say king? Yes. Thank you. The knight.
White can't take the knight because why?
So if white takes the knight here, then black starts pushing his pawn to h4 with h3 incoming. And the idea of trying to defend against this it looks very difficult. So white just chooses.
It'd be cool to watch a chess game, to experience watching it without understanding it just for a day. I feel like I could use that to make better content.
True. Okay.
I mean, that's what getting drunk does. You start to get,
Unfortunately for chess players, it never leaves your brain.
Yeah, it's still
Doesn't matter how.
But this is
Yeah.
actually a very cute move because black's queen is under attack, but the king is so cramped that he can't actually take it, or he's going to get checkmated by a pawn, which is a sad way to go, truly.
yeah, those pawns are doing a lot of work here.
They
That is
really
the
are.
King's Indian.
This is
He
the
managed
King's Indian player's
the
dream.
attack of the kingside pawns.
Yeah, these pawns are like right. So they're the ones that are doing a lot of the threatening.
Right.
That's
And they're
cool.
also opening up the position to bring more of the pieces in. But that the pawns kind of help break open the king side, but they can't checkmate by themselves. So after the pawns come in, that's when you need to start bringing in pieces as well, which you will see Hikaru do here. Okay.
There you go. He
What
puts.
more
Yeah,
sacrifice?
so this
Oh.
was actually another beautiful sacrifice in the game.
But then puts the king in check with a pawn.
Right. And the pawn is going to be given here for free. But the idea is you're giving your own piece because you want to have more space and open up the king, which is what you're always trying to do when you have a king side. You're trying to remove as many of the king's defenders as you can without giving up too much of.
And
your
then you have a
pieces.
ton of pieces on the king's side
Yep.
for black, just waiting
Exactly.
to do harm. And then
And notice how every single move white is getting attacked. Like they're
Right.
just never getting a break. Black just keeps throwing all their
So
pieces.
it's funny that black's queen has been hanging for like 3 moves now, and white still can't do
Black-
anything about
yeah.
it.
yeah, so rook puts the king in check.
Yep.
The king runs.
And then again, we leave the queen hanging and you develop a piece, the slight squared bishop that's so important, and you're once again threatening checkmate on g2.
And then bishop's coming to
Yeah.
Once
game.
again, the queen hanging. but they just can't.
I mean, the game is just so beautiful. The amount of calculation Hikaru put into this position.
Just feels like so much is in danger.
Right.
It's so interesting. And then knight takes what?
Yep.
Pawns.
So now his queen is attacked twice and he doesn't care. He takes the bishop and he's still threatening the checkmate on g2.
And then the queen takes the bishop.
So now he's defending against g2. And black just goes and grabs some material back here.
So here, black is winning.
Well, he ends up winning a knight here because black had to be so much on the defensive.
He's just taking pieces.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're up 2 whole pieces, so you would resign
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
But
And then queen.
Queen. And then you take. And then the rook takes. And there's not as much of an attack on the king anymore, but Hikaru is up a knight here, which is GG.
Yeah, what's the correct way of saying that? Because I played Demis Hassabis. I played him in chess, and then I quickly realized, like from his facial expressions, that I should have like stopped playing.
Oh,
It was like it's already
Oh,
set,
yeah, when it's
and then he's like like this is the good time to like give up.
Resign.
Right.
You're not going to get the checkmate. Where like he could see like the checkmate is like 5 or 7 moves
Yeah.
away or something. This and what's the play? What's the
Usually you
etiquette
have to resign if you're in a position, or you should, through chess etiquette, resign when you're in a position where your opponent is definitely going to win out of respect. Like if you're a piece down. And obviously all top grandmasters do that. The only people who don't do that is kids, because their
They love to
coaches
play till the
their coaches
checkmate.
always tell them never resign, and they'll
Yeah.
be in hopelessly lost positions playing against like 2 rooks, a king, and they only have their sole king, but
Very
they're still
funny,
playing
honestly.
on. So that's a position where it's obvious they can't win. And
because the kids might make errors.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
might as well. That was the interesting thing about I think Game 6 of the previous World Championship with Magnus.
was it the one where he beat Nep?
Yeah, the first time he beat him, where it was like he said that I don't know how often you come across this kind of situation. He said the engines predict a draw,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a draw. So you play on
hmm
hoping that you take a person into I mean, this is I guess an end game thing. You take them to deep water and they make a positional mistake or something. I don't know when, like, he from his gut knows that this is supposed to be a draw, but he still
Right.
plays on.
Yeah, I mean, that is one where it could theoretically be a draw, but it could be very hard to defend because it's a hard technique to know as a human. And especially in that game, I know that Nepo was also in time pressure, which makes it even harder. So in situations like that, you should always continue. It's more where an engine would give you something like +10 or something where it's not just clearly a win, but anybody would know how to win. And that's where you're usually supposed to resign.
So what do you find beautiful about this game? Is it the attacking chess and just the asymmetry of it?
It's the asymmetry, and it's the fact that this is the dream for the King's Indian, where you're able to get a beautiful attack. And there was also those 2 really nice sacrifices where Black just continuously kept putting pressure on White's king to the point where he was able to win material. And the best part of it is that if the attack didn't work out, Black would have been completely lost.
How often does that happen, by the way? Like, as an attacking player, how often do you put yourself in the position of like, I'm screwed unless this works out?
In online chess, more than I should. And it's usually when I sacrifice, I know it's either going to work or I'm lost. And
Yeah.
those are the most fun positions to play usually.
But in tournaments, if you're doing a sacrifice, you're playing it with 100% confidence because you're taking the time to calculate it. But yeah, when you have 3 minutes, you don't have time. So you take a whim and you follow your intuition.
Or
and then you find out later.
Or you're very confident it'll work and you haven't calculated all the way until the end, but you've calculated to the point where you have enough in exchange for the sack and you think you could play that position.